So let's add our first option. Let's start by a simple one. So let's add the footer text, this one. And let's actually remove this long widget. So to add a setting, we will use a method in the WP customizer class called add setting. So let's do that. Let's go to the customizer PHP, and then let's use the WP customize class and the add setting method. And then the first argument is in an ID for this setting. So this also should be prefixed. And let's call it site info. And the second argument is an array of options for this setting. So if you take a look here, you can read about all the different options that you can put here. So we have the type, it could be theme mod or option. And you can read about the difference here, but to summarize, the difference is an option can be used regardless what the currently active theme is. However, a theme mod is only used by the current active theme. So usually we'll use theme mod, and the options is meant to be used by plugins more than themes. And theme mod is the default option, so we won't have to add it every time. And we have some others as well, but let's just start by the important one first, which is the default value. So this is the default value for this field, and in our case, let's set it to an empty string. And the other important one is sanitize callback. And this should be a function name, and this function will run before the value is saved to the database in order to make sure it's sanitized. So this will take function name, and this function could be one of the built-in WordPress sanitization functions. So let's so it could be one of these, or you can define your own function and put the name there. And we'll do both cases in throughout this section. But for now, let's assume the site info text will just be a text field, so we can use sanitize text field. So sanitize text field. So now we have our setting, but the setting is useless unless it has a control to control it. So let's add a control now for this setting. So using the same class and a method called add control. And the first argument should match the ID of the setting. So let's copy that. And the second argument is also an array of some options that we can provide to the control. So the most important one is the type. And this should be an HTML input type, like a text or a number or a select or checkbox. And you can find all the different ones in the link I put in the lecture links. So in this case, we'll need a text field, and we can also add a label. And make sure all your labels and any text is escaped and translated. So let's call it site info and our domain. And finally, it takes a section. So remember, in the last lecture, we mentioned that controls exist in sections, these ones. So these are controls, and these are sections. So we need to choose either one of these sections to add our control in, or create a new section and add it in it. So let's start by choosing one of these sections. So to know the ID for these sections, we have a table here, this one. And these are all the core sections that exists in WordPress core and their priority, and we'll talk about the priority in a moment. And you'll notice that there are some sections here that do not appear here, and that's because they exist in the WordPress core, but they don't have any controls. So if a section does not have any controls, it won't appear. The first section, which is the site identity, is this one, site title and tagline. So let's copy its ID, and let's put our control in this section. And we have some extra brackets here. So let's now save and see if our field is added. Let's refresh. So let's see the site identity, and we now have a site info text field. Great, so let's just remove the widget again. I forgot to save it. Anytime you do something, you should publish. So let's now create a new section and add our field in. So we will create a new section called footer settings or something, and then we'll add our section in, our control in. So let's do that. And similarly, we will use a method in the WP customize class and it's called add section, and it takes an ID. So let's call it footer options and an array, and here we can define a title for this section. So escape and translate. Let's call it footer options and text domain, and you can also have a description. So could be some text like you can change footer options from here, and text domain. So let's save now, and before saving, let's just copy the ID that we chose here and put it in the site info control. And let's now see. So we have footer options, and inside of it we have the site info. So you might be asking how to change the order of these sections, and the answer is this priority here will determine which section will appear first. So we have all the default priorities. So the site title and tagline is 20, and the second one, which is the menus, is 100. So let's say we want the footer section to be between the 20 and the 100. So what we can do is add a priority here and choose a number like 30. And now we have it as the second section. So great, we have our option now and we can control it. So let's now use it in our actual theme. So let's go to the template parts and footer and the site info or info.php. And instead of these hard-coded texts, let's now fetch the setting from the database and display it in the footer. So let's create a variable called site info. And to get an option, you can use either get option or get theme mod. So in our case, our setting type is theme mod, so we will use theme mod and then simply just give it the ID of the setting and the second argument, which is important, which is a default value, and this should match the default value that we assigned here. So it's an empty string, and then take this variable and display it here. But remember that any value that comes from the database should be escaped. So let's echo escape HTML and our value. So let's see now. So the default value is an empty string, and as you can see, it displays an empty space here. So let's do like we did with the footer widget. Let's only display this div only if we have a value. So if site info so let's refresh, and now we don't have anything here, and let's try and add a value. And now we have it. As you can see, it's refreshing the whole iframe just for this part. So we will tackle this later, but let's now tackle another problem first, which is adding HTML here. So you are calling sanitize text field before saving to the database, and that will strip any HTML, and you are also escaping the value in the actual HTML file. So if you type any HTML here, so you know it's very common to put a link here, And if we did so, it won't be a link, it will just be text. And if we save and refresh, it's actually saved in the database as text. So let's tackle that in the next lecture. So we will try to create a custom sanitization function. Instead sanitize text field, we will create a function that will allow some HTML to pass while removing any other HTML. So see you in the next lecture.